All right. Hello, everyone. Let me thank you all for your participation to this webinar, which is dedicated to the Iranian students' feminist and revolutionary movement, which sparked following the murder of Mahsa Jina Amini on September 16th, a 20-year-old woman while she was in custody of the so-called morality police of the Islamic Republic of Iran. As you know, the date of November 17th is a historical landmark as it commemorates the bloody attack on the medical faculty in Prague by the Nazis in 1939, who killed 9 students, including Jan Opletal, and sent more than 1,200 students to the concentration camps. We have chosen this date as the ongoing bloody repression by the Iranian regime of university students, but also high school students, resonates badly with that terrible moment of history. Indeed, their demands for basic human rights, justice, and dignity has received as only response tear gas, batons, hunting buckshots, shotguns, mass arrests and imprisonments, killings and kidnappings. Let me correct one important point. I should have said the student movement has sparked once again, as Iranian students have been fighting for freedom and democracy since decades now. More specifically, despite more than 4 decades of repression, exclusion, attempted usurpation of the university space by the Islamic Republic, universities continue to be the hotbeds of the battle for freedom of thought and speech in Iran. Today, we have the privilege of the participation of academic specialists in the webinar to help us understand the ongoing movement, both from a historical perspective and in its recent and current form. To go further, we will also have an almost live view of the ongoing student movement, the silent cultural revolution behind the extreme level of crackdown by the Iranian militia based on material provided by the students themselves through their social media channels. Of course, we could not imagine 1 second discussing the student movement in a purely academic way, given the extreme situation of human rights violations, ongoing crimes, but also planned ones. It is terrible to remind that the death penalty has been voted by 277 members out of 290 of the Iranian parliament for those who demand peacefully their most basic rights. It is then of utmost importance that we stand in solidarity with the students in Iran, that we voice out loud their voices and condemn the Islamic Republic regime crimes. For this, we have the immense privilege of the support of the Global Student Forum, which is hosting this event, which is a worldwide spread network of student activists, as well as the European State Union, regrouping 45 student unions across 40 countries in Europe. So in the second part of this webinar, we will hear and see their expression of solidarity and support to Iranian students for freedom, or liberté in French, azadi in Persian, or in whatever language. Freedom of thought can only be conceived as one and indivisible, not separable in geographical areas, nor limited in time. So all academic scholars, students, high school students are battling in essence for the same goal everywhere. In addition to awareness rising, and solidarity, we need lever arms to put pressure on the Islamic Republic to stop violating the university and school spaces, stop the crackdown, free all prisoners, and respect the most basic human rights once again. So in the final and the third part of this webinar, we will have a panel to discuss further actions along these paths and goals. So I thank you once again for being there. And I want to ask Chowra Makaremi, who is an anthropologist at the French National Center for Research, to start the first session of this webinar, which is academic.
Thank you very much, Arache, for initiating this important event of transnational solidarity with the students' movement in Iran. So as you said, on September 13th, Jina Mahsa Amini from Saqez in Iranian Kurdistan was arrested in the Tehran subway for wearing an improper way. She died 3 days later of a brain hemorrhage, beaten to death by the morality police. With the cry of woman, life, freedom, Jina Amini's funeral plunged the country into a cycle of uprisings that involved 90 cities in 3 days, over 100 universities in 10 days, from the Iranian Kurdistan to the province of Sistan Baluchistan at the border with Pakistan, from the elite universities to the poorer suburbs of Tehran and to the conservative bazaar. The movement has continued for exactly 2 months today. It is the longest running protest movement since the Iranian Revolution of '79. Whatever will be the outcome of this movement that the protesters themselves want to name a revolution, whatever will be the outcome of the present uprisings, they operate a radical shift in the political life of Iran and maybe the region for a few reasons that I would like to very briefly enumerate as an introduction. Many first times are experienced here that are of importance not only to the Iranian society in its quest for freedom, but also to any citizen in our contemporary world. The uprisings gather together Iranians across social classes, genders, ethnicities, and generations in small and big cities, in the center and in the peripheries. This movement of revolt is triggered by feminist demands of political equality and freedom. It is not a women's rights movement or a movement against the mandatory hijab, but a movement for political equality. This demand of freedom and equality is based on the awareness that the segregation of parts of the population, be it women, gender minorities, ethnic minorities, and subaltern classes, this regime of widespread systematic segregation modeled upon the matrix of gender segregation in Iran affects the very nature of the state and society. So there cannot be a republic as long as there is gender apartheid. The concept of gender apartheid gives the tools and lenses to understand different forms of domination, gender oppression, economic inequalities and pressures, state violence and economic domination against ethnic minorities. So to understand this multi-layer system of domination as the product of one and a same political order named the Islamic Republic. The analyses in terms of gender apartheid were introduced by Iranian feminist movements, which are the more vibrant civil society movements in the last 3 decades in Iran. In this way, we can say that feminism as a tool of analysis and as a mode of mobilization is the political trigger of the current revolutionary movement. And reversely, we can say that the current movement shows an example of how feminist theory and action can be a revolutionary force. So why revolutionary? Well, it is not the first time that the Iranian population protests. Many movements erupted in the country and reached a dramatic peak almost regularly every 10 years, in 1997, in 2009, in 2019. In 1997, the protests were led by the students' movements. The 2009 Green Movement was a middle-class demand for political freedom and rights within the framework of a reform of the Islamic regime. The riots erupting from 2017 until 2019, in turn, were led by the working class and impoverished youth in rebellion against economic suffocation. These uprisings were violently repressed, leading to more than 1,500 deaths in 2 weeks, according to Reuters. And today, on the 17th of November, is the 3rd day of an incredibly powerful 3-day national mobilization in memory of these events in Iran. So we can see how the current protest carries the legacies of past struggles in many ways, and different past struggles. But for the first time, they bring together the different groups that have been mobilizing at different times. The movements draw on its cohesion and solidarity, gender solidarity, but also very importantly, inter-ethnic solidarity and the refusal of nationalist hegemony. The strength of today's protests seems rooted in the fact that a unifying, quite simple demand is giving a political frame to the widespread discontent and outrage. That is the demand for a regime change. And the slogans can't be clearer. This is our last message, chant the protesters. Our aim is the political order itself. These uprisings are innovative in their content, but also in their form, since they focus on very local, widespread, small-scale unrest that tire out and scatter the security forces. And I believe innovation and political imagination are also what characterizes revolutionary movements. But what is the most striking for observers is the joy, the energy, and hope that fuels this movement. Since fear has been the main tool of political control in Iran, there is a considerable effort to self-discipline and fight fear amongst the population across generations. And this shows us once again that emotions are not forces that possess and submerge us only. They are collective tools and ways of being, and can be triggers for change. And this reminder is very inspiring, I think, for all of us in the global South and North, regardless of the local political challenges we have to face. But beyond the time and space of the uprising, what is happening right now and the tearing apart of the curtain of fear is changing the relationships between the Iranian state and society with no possibility of return. The foundation of the political order, as we have known it for 43 years, the foundation of a political order that built itself through violence and war in the first decade after the revolution, this is definitely falling apart. It does not mean that the Iranian regime is falling apart tomorrow, but it means that its political and ideological foundations have already collapsed. The last 2 months showed that the social organization, as well as the tactics and strategies of the uprisings, lay importantly on the student and youth movements as a crucial link between street protests and struggles in the wider body of the civil society. In the context of a harsh repression, this link is very important, and the students' movement appears as a driving force. Our distinguished panelists in the first part of this webinar will inform us about the genealogy and social and political rule and challenges of the Iranian student movement in order to give some perspective and depth in our analysis of the situation.